guys may be seated. Oh man, what a night we've already had, and I'm honored by those kind words, Dr. Jones. And I will just have to start by saying, I know we've been here a while, but you guys don't have anywhere to go tonight, right? You're from out of town. Whataburger's open all night, so you can hit. Of course. There it is. Whataburger is open all night, but before I get into what I want to say, just as Pastor Brett brought out the ladders today to preach to us, I have to start by saying that there are men and women all across this network and this family that have climbed the ladder for me, not to bring the ceiling down, but to keep raising it up and to help me think bigger, to imagine bigger, to dream bigger. And so I can't honor all of you, but I have to honor my dad, Pastor Tommy Galloway, and just the legacy of what was imparted to me as a child, and then obviously Dr. Brassfield and Kathy. We love you with all of our hearts. For Sarah and I, you're like another mom and dad to us. It's not only our boss and our mentors, but there's no one like the Brassfields, are there? And thank you for leading us. And Pastors Brett and Giselle, Pastor Scott and Melanie, seriously, I can't. I'm trying to work on the weight limit, but thank you for having grace on me. And Pastor Brett, you're coming down to, you're on my side of it. And Pastor Scott, you too. I'm just saying that. Hey, well, let me get into my notes. In the beginning was the word. I love my pastors, and if I'm no longer the young guy at Destiny, isn't that a weird thing to say? But I want to just encourage all of you that are millennial and younger. We've got great fathers and great pastors and great leaders in this network. You got to find someone. There is no reason, if you don't feel like you have someone to go to, I don't think you're looking hard enough, because we have some great men who want to invest and pour into us and lean into that. Also, as Dr. Jones said, Sarada is the biggest ladder that we brought up today is what she has been for my life, and I love you, I honor you. Seriously, I'm the one that gets to be on stage, but without her, I don't know what I would do. Hey, let's get into the word today, because I believe that God began something he wants to finish. I believe what we saw was the start, not the end, of what God has for us this evening and tomorrow. I believe that the gospel writers all had a little bit of a rivalry with one another. As I've studied the New Testament, I can't help but notice that they try to one-up one another every now and then. Here's an example. Matthew says, look, I can trace the genealogy all the way back to Abraham. And Luke says, hold my grape juice. Because I'm going all the way back to Adam to show you that he's not just the descendant of Abraham to show he's the Jewish Messiah, but he is the descendant of Adam to show that he is Savior of the world. Mark, on the other hand, has no time for any of this foolishness. So he begins his gospel with, in the beginning, the good news of Jesus, the Son of God. I don't even have time to get you from A to B. I got things to do, places to be, demons to cast out. Let's go. Mark would make a great youth pastor. We just don't have time for any of the details. Let's go. But John, looking at what was done in Matthew and Mark and Luke, says, I believe we need to fill this out a little bit, because before Abraham was, before Adam was, so in the beginning, before God called you to ministry, he was. Before he sent you to your city, he was. Before the problem began, he was. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Take that, Matthew. Take that, Luke. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind. The light shines in darkness, but the darkness cannot comprehend it. That if you can't preach John 1:1-5, you might be in the wrong business, because in the beginning was the Word. And I wish we could stay in John 1. But as we flip the page from John 1 to John 2, we find a transition from a celestial city to an impoverished town called Cana. And we see why the Word, though he had it all, emptied himself and lowered himself to come to a place with great need and great emptiness and great longing. Let me take you to that story. On the third day, oh man, already? We're in a hurry, and the first thing you're going to tell me is on the third day? Because here's what I've preached. I've preached what happened at this wedding, the water turned to wine. I've preached on who was at the wedding, Mary, Jesus, and the disciples. I've talked about what happened at the wedding, but one thing I never thought about was, when was the wedding? It was on the third day. See, we don't know what the third day reference is. Maybe John is trying to chronologically place this after the baptism of Jesus. Maybe he's talking about Tuesday, which is the third day of the week. But I think John wants us to see it's on the third day. And things happen on the third day. And we're prefiguring and pre-shadowing the miracle that's going to occur, because things that are empty don't stay empty on the third day. See, in day one, the sky and the earth is created. And day two, the ocean and the land shows up, but still barren, void, and nothing. But on the third day, things begin to rise from the ground and life comes. There's something that happens on the third day. On day one, Abraham marches, hears a word from God to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. On day two, it's a long, sad walk up a mountain. But on day three, there's a ram in the bush, because there's something about the third day. Day one is a day of tragedy and sadness and difficulty. Day two is a day of sorrow and longing and despair. But there's always a day three where the empty becomes full, where the dead come to life, and that which was lost is found. Before we talk about the what and the when, and I've got to talk to you about when it happens. It was the third day. And it took place at Cana in Galilee. Cana, podunk town Cana. The last location we saw Jesus was heaven. And now he's in Arkansas. Now he's in small town Texas. Cana. And here's the thing about Cana. Filled with impoverished day laborers. A city that was forgotten about. In a region occupied by Gentiles, bandits, and thieves. And Jesus shows up there to do his first miracle. It says, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. It's gone. And he said, woman, if you're here with your spouse, look at her and say, woman, and don't you do it. Do not. Just making sure you're woman, why do you involve me? And then his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. So the first miracle happens at a place where things tend to run dry. See, we like to think of Cana as an exception when this wedding was likely the rule. What I have focused on in the past is the great shame this would have caused the family of the bride to run out of wine. But in a poor town like Cana, in a village like that, this wedding was not the exception, it was the usual. Cana was a place where things just run out. Cana was just a place where things go dry. So the first thing Jesus does after being baptized, he says, I'm going to go to a place that runs out, where there's never enough, where it's always dry. That's where I want to go. I don't want to go to Jerusalem where the temple is or Rome where the palace is. Take me to a dry place. Take me to an empty place. Take me to a place that needs a miracle. We live in a Cana world. We live in a world where the party's still going on, but the wine's out. That we're still doing the cha-cha slide and dancing along while knowing there's no wine here, there's no joy here, there's no hope here, there's no peace here. The wine's out, but the party's still going on. And Jesus shows up saying they're going to realize sooner or later there is no wine here. They're still partying, they're still celebrating, but there's no wine. I believe that we live in a wineless world. I believe we live in a world that's dancing and humming and singing and doing the cha-cha slide, but there is no real joy and there is no real peace. And one day they're going to realize that the wine is out. And if you haven't disqualified yourself by your Facebook posts, they're going to come to a disciple of Jesus and say, hey, I'm realizing I've been dancing, but there's no wine. And where can I get some of that joy that you have? Where can I get some of that peace and patience that you have? But we live in a wineless world, and eventually they realize I better get somebody that knows where the wine is. We live in a wineless world. And if we're honest, we'd also say that Cana represents our ministries. Ministry can be an empty place. Because there's never enough of you to go around. Come on, if you're at the office, you should be with the people. And if you're with the people, you should be in the office. If you're studying too much, you need to reprioritize to make sure you're doing enough counseling. And if you're counseling a lot, you need to spend a little more time beefing up those sermons. Is this anybody else, or is this just, am I talking to anybody? That ministry, there's just never enough of you to go around. If you're in vocational ministry, a challenge would be to ask 5 people to write a job description for what they think you should do. And you would realize that you would need about 420 hours a week to do what everyone expects you to do the way they expect you to do it. And this is constantly a place where church is still happening. Worship nights are still occurring. Life groups are flowing. Staff's getting paid. But if we're honest, the wine's run out. Just, maybe it's different for you, but you know, whenever you get to Monday and you just preached on Sunday, and then you realize there's another Sunday in 6 days. And the wine's run out. And you've said everything you know to say already. And you've done everything you know to do. You've got leadership challenges and you've read every book and went to every conference, but it did not change the fact that person is still difficult and no conference is going to help them unless it's an exorcism conference. That's the only. The wine's just run out. What do you do when the wine runs out? So every time I've preached this story, I've preached from the misconception that this would have been the exception, and that the family would have faced great shame, which is contextually relevant, but it's not the whole story, because the economic realities of Cana is that it's just a place where the wine runs out, where there's never enough to go around. The wedding of Cana is not unusual, except for Mary. Because every wedding before that wedding had run out at some point. But there was someone there who knew, wait a minute, I don't just know the problem, but I know the solution. That I'm not just an observer of a wineless world, I know where to go. That I'm not gonna just complain about how bad the world is, but I'm gonna take it to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, they have no more wine. My first misconception was that this was the exception, not the rule, but Cana was a place where things run out. Here's my second misconception, is I was thinking of weddings through the lens of our modern day society, where it's really all about the bride and the groom is just a prop. But in the first century, come on somebody, it was all about the groom and the bride was just a property. And because of this, I'm not saying it's right, it's the Bible if you don't like me. And because of this reality, the groom was responsible for funding the whole thing. So I've preached this would have been great shame on the bride's family, but it was not the bride's responsibility to bring the wine. It was the groom's responsibility to bring the wine. And as the bride of Christ, we have a groom who always brings enough wine. At his Last Supper, he says, take, drink, this is my blood, take all of it. And I know you might not need to know this, you're preachers, pastors, leaders, but let me let you know the blood is enough. Jesus learned his lesson from Cana. It's never going to run out for you. It's never going to run out for your family. The blood is enough. Sometimes we're trying to earn our own salvation through the work of ministry that we do, but you can't earn it. You don't deserve it. The blood is enough. That every drop of blood he shed was shed for you and me. Jesus came to save pastors. Come on, somebody. You need the blood in your life. And Jesus went to Cana and said, I know in Cana it ran out, but on Calvary it will never run out. That I was once at a wedding where the groom didn't provide enough, but I want you to know for you and your children and all that are far off, every drop of blood was shed. The wine never runs out of his blood for you and for I. As the bride, we don't have to provide the wine. We have a groom who will do it for us. So Mary comes to him and says, Jesus, we have no wine. They're out of wine. Now, Destiny is an egalitarian organization, so I'm not going to talk about women in general. Can I just talk about my wife for a moment? That she has a way of making requests masked as statements. Jesus, they have no more wine. A fact, a statement with a request embedded in it. Our anniversary is next month. Roses are my favorite. The toilet seat was left up again. I like those shoes. Now, after almost 11 years of marriage, I'm almost able to divine the request masked as a statement. But Jesus seems to be a little bit slower to respond. And he says, woman, what does that have to do with me? Don't you know that my hour has not yet come? What Jesus is saying is that he understands that his life will end in a tragic death. He understands there is an inevitable clash with the religious and political authorities that will lead to his crucifixion, but he has things to do before it gets there. And if I go around making wine for a party this size and word gets out, then it's going to expedite a process. Could it be that the miracle you've been praying for it's just not time yet? That God who knows the beginning and the end, he knows what it would do to you, that if he were to answer that prayer right now, it would actually destroy you. And so, no, I've got to look at this from a bigger perspective. And Mary, you want wine, but I'm thinking about eternity. Mary, you want wine, I'm thinking about my blood being shed for all mankind. Mary, you want me to solve a temporary problem, but you don't see the bigger picture. I think our prayer lives where Jesus is saying, look, it's not my hour yet, that if I do it the way you want me to do it and when you want me to do it, it'll mess up what I have planned for you later. That if I open that door, it'll mean that I can't open the right one a few years later. That if I give you the position now, your character isn't ready to sustain it. And you're going to crash and burn, and I've got bigger plans for you. And so the next time you get passed over, why don't you give him a praise, because he is looking out for you saying, I'm going to answer it, but you don't see the whole picture. You want wine, and I'm trying to save the world. But then he got to thinking about it, and I don't have much time to go into this, but he gets to thinking about it, and he says, I think I found a way that I can make the wine where only a couple people know. I can do the miracle and still not expedite my death. Did you know that God has options that you don't know about? And that you're praying for things and he's saying no or not yet, and you're frustrated, but he's actually doing it in a way that's better than anything you can ask or think or imagine. He's going to do it, just not your way. And so she looks at the servants and says, do whatever he tells you. That's all some of you need right there. That was worth your trip to Destiny. Do whatever he tells you. That if you would just learn that whatever he tells you to do, just do it. That he has your best interest in mind. That he sees everything. And if you'll just do what he tells you to do, it's all going to work out. This is a way of exercising bold faith, but also acknowledging the sovereignty of God. God, do what you will with my life. God, whatever door you want to open, why don't you open it wide? And whatever door you want to close, just go ahead and close it. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Do whatever he says. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Let's pause here for a second. The average wine bottle in the first century held less than 20 ounces. That they were crying over an empty bottle that held 19 ounces while Jesus was in the back room looking at 180 gallons. What are you losing sleep over tonight? That in the back room, he's like, wait a minute. All you're worried about is $100,000. All you're worried about is a building. All you're worried about is a staff member. Don't you know that I can do exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or think? And you're upset about a 20-ounce bottle whenever I'm working on 180 gallons of wine. Let me tell you, the best thing that can happen for some of you is for the wine to run out. Because why would you want 20 ounces when you can have 180 gallons? Why would you want to do this on your own strength when you can tap into his? Why do you want to go to sermoncentral.com whenever you can download from the Holy Spirit and give the real wine? Why would you want to lead in your own strength? And why would you want to build your own team and solve your own problems and work your own solutions whenever there's a better, bigger solution that you just don't know about yet, and you're crying over the 20-ounce bottle, unaware of what's happening in the background? And there's 180 gallons there. And oh man, there's just so much here. But he says they're religious urns. They're ceremonial urns. They were urns used to purify the outside. And Jesus says, I'm going to take what religion has used to purify the outside and bring joy on the inside. That the best religion can do is to clean you up after you fell. But I'm going to do something that changes you from the inside, because this has never worked. See, Moses turns the water to blood to represent judgment. And Jesus turns the water to wine to represent joy. It's not the same thing. So many of us are turning the water to blood to judge our people. Don't do it. Pastor's monitoring your social. He knows what's happening. Whenever you say, you know what, I can't continually clean up the messes you're making. Why don't you get filled with the wine of the Holy Spirit? Change from the inside out, and you'll experience a joy that transforms your behavior. The best this was used for before was to clean up a mess afterwards. But now it begins to change me on the inside. And so Jesus didn't just pick the largest receptacle he could find. He intentionally went to the religious institutions and said, this is not working for us anymore. Church as usual isn't working for us anymore. The religious systems and structures have to go. There's got to be wine for the people to see real change. Then Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. And so they filled them about a quarter of the way up. And they got about a quarter of the way up miracle. Halfway. No. All the way. Can I let you know that your obedience still matters to God? And that if you want a full miracle, you need a full obedience. And if you really want him to work it all out, you need to do all the way in. And there are some of us that are saying, what's the bare minimum that I can do to get blessed by God? But instead, God, I want to fill it to the brim. I'm believing you for something much bigger than I can see. And so I'm going to fill it up to the brim. And so they did. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They filled it with water and they drew it out, but they drew some out, which means that they drew some water out. If it had already changed to wine, it would have said they drew wine out. But the last thing that we read was it was water. It's still water. It was water in the urn, and now it's water in the serving decanter. And take it to the master of banquet. Now that's faith right there. Faith is the last time I saw it was water. When I filled it up, it was still water. And I'm walking it to the master of the banquet, and as far as my eyes can tell, I have water in this serving container. But whenever I pour it out, it's no longer water, it's wine. Can I tell you that you're burnt out? Not because you're pouring out. You're burnt out because you're trying to make the wine. And if you're trying to bring the fire every Sunday, if you're trying to lead the teams, if you're trying to be Brother Wonderful 24/7, if you're trying to dream it up and budget it out, eventually that runs empty. But if you go, all I've got to do is fill my life up to the brim. If all I have to do is pour out what I have, all I've got is a word in my spirit. All I've got is a dream that God gave me. All I've got is a little vision and a little... But if I will give what I have and just pour it out, it doesn't become wine until I pour it out. I don't see the miracle until I step into it. See, I want the Red Sea to part and then I cross, but he says, step in the Red Sea and then it will part as you walk in. I want him to multiply it while it's in my hands. But he said, no, give me what you have and then I'll multiply it. But God, it's just a few loaves and a few fish. It can't feed the masses. Yes, in your hands it can, but whenever you pour it out, whenever you pour it out, it becomes wine. Whenever you pour it out, it becomes a miracle. And I know many of us are weary because what we do isn't easy. Ministry is a lot like Cana. There's just not enough of you to go around. There's not enough money to go around. Not enough staff to go around. Not enough joy and peace to go around. And if you're feeling the obligation or the pressure, if you came to Destiny Conference 2024 so you can learn how to power through your insufficiencies. You're listening to the wrong preacher tonight. Because as much as I love you and hope you have a healthy self-esteem, I'm not here to build your self-esteem. I'm here to let you know that what you have will always run out. That you may be the best preacher in your town, but there will be a Sunday where you go, oh God, what are we talking about today? That you may have all your structures and systems and you're coaching other people. You're an online consultant and you're going to encounter a problem where I have no idea what to do other than just burn the building down. Because if you're producing the wine empty, not surprising, you weren't expected to do that. I wasn't expecting the day laborer in Cana to provide enough wine for a party for 7 days. This is the reality of who they are and where they live. There's not enough of you to go around to do all that God has called you to do. Because we raised the ceiling with you this morning, He's called you to do something bigger than you can see right now. And if you're trying to do it on your own, let me tell you, the wine is going to run out. But if you say, all I'm going to do is every Sunday, I'm going to take whatever I have and I'm going to fill it to the brim. And I'm going to go, God, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm willing to pour it out because I believe that whenever I pour it out, you'll do the miracle. That whenever I step out, you're going to do the hard part. If I'll do what I can do, you'll do what only you can do. And I don't have to turn the water into wine. I'm a servant of the Lord. My only job is to pour it out. How many of you order from Uber Eats or DoorDash? Let me see. All the rich people raise their hand. We see you. We see you. You know what I've never asked? I've never asked anything about my delivery driver. I order the food. I eat the food. I know someone dropped it off. But I don't really care who it was. We focus so much on the delivery person for the wine. Not my job to make the wine. My job week after week and day after day is just to pour it out. The master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much. But you have saved the best till now. I don't have to tell this room that whatever Jesus does is so much better than whatever you can do. That the solution you're trying to come up with fails in comparison to what He can do. And that's the end of the miracle. But then John says one more thing. He says, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs. Jesus, why Cana? Because it's pointing to something else. Why a wedding? Because it's pointing to something else. Why bringing fulfillment to an empty place? Because it's pointing to something else. Because the first sign happened on the third day when a woman named Mary found something that was empty. And the seventh sign happened on the third day when a woman named Mary found something that was empty. And because it was the third day, emptiness no longer has a place. The only thing that is empty is the tomb. Cana prefigures Calvary, that every drop of the wine was shed and poured out and emptied, and Calvary was an empty place. Calvary was a dark place. Calvary was the day where dreams went to die and where hope was dashed. But then there was a third day whenever a woman named Mary said, hey, I recognize there's something empty. And God looked at what was empty and said, I'm going to fill it, but I'm not filling the tomb. I'm filling the heavens and the earth with the glory of God. I'm not filling a 20-ounce bottle. I'm filling 180 gallons of wine. Why don't you stand with me? Here's what I want you to see. That God is working in a way beyond what you can imagine. And the reason why you're burnt out is because you are taking the responsibility on yourself to do what only He can do. As long as I'm pouring out, I'll never be burnt out. As long as I recognize where the wine's coming from. Isn't that good news tonight? But there's one piece of better news. That God loves the servants who pour out the wine so much that He lets them know where it comes from, first of all. But second of all, after the tomb was empty and the throne was full, we read that He sent His Holy Spirit according to the prophet Joel, who would say, in the last days, God says, I will. Man, that's some good news for people who have been pouring out all year long with empty bottles and no, I will. I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters, because you're pouring out on others, on your sons and daughters, I'm going to pour out. Because you're praying for someone else's kids, I'm going to take care of your kids. Because you're walking through turmoil with another family, I'm going to save your family. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. And then even on my servants, even on the ones whose job is to pour out, even on those who are weary and broken and empty, even on my servants, I will pour out my Spirit in those days and they will prophesy. I'm telling you, Destiny, you have spent the last year since we've been together pouring out to your city, pouring out yourself, giving everything you have to other people. And what God is saying tonight is, now it's my turn. Let me be the bartender. Let me pour it out on you. You don't have to pour out the wine. Tonight is a night that I'm going to pour out on you. The worship team's going to join me, and I know we've went long tonight, but if you're empty, you don't care. Because you would rather stay for another 15 minutes than leave here the same way that you came in. That you'd rather linger a little bit longer and say, I just can't keep the party up when the wine's gone. I can't keep doing this Sunday after Sunday. I just can't. I can't host the party with no wine, and they don't know yet, but I know that I can't go on like this much longer. I know that I'm empty. I know that there's no direction or vision. I know that I don't want to do this all the time. I know that the wine's out. Because all of us, as servants in the house of the Lord, feel the responsibility to bring the wine to the people. But let us not take on the responsibility of making the wine for the people. Because all I can do is pour it out. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes? Here's what I want to do right now. If you'll be honest and say, it's been an empty season. Life has been a lot like Cana lately. And I'm trying, going deep into the well, just pulling myself up by my bootstraps and doing the best I can, but just let the wines run out. Can I just see your hand? Yeah, there it is. There it is, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Maybe there are those of us here who we're not discouraged, but we've been called to do something much bigger than us, and we look at the pressure and go, how am I ever going to do this? I don't, they didn't teach me this. I don't know what to do about this. And it's not a bad thing, but it's a good thing. You're just overwhelmed. I want to see your hand. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do with this thing that God's called me to do. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than me. Well, here's what's going to happen. If you raise your hand for either one of those, I want you to come to the front now because the wine's being poured out. And you spend your life and your days pouring it out for other people. And what we're going to humbly ask God to do right now is what he said that he would do in his word, which is pour out his Holy Spirit on his servants tonight. For those who empty themselves will be filled. That you'd be able to leave this place and say, silver and gold have I none. I don't have anything to give you, but here's what I have. Take up your bed and walk, not because I can do it, but because I'm tapped into the one who can. Pour out your Spirit, Lord. Pour out your Spirit. From Cana to Calvary,